What's going on, peeps? Mastermyne here. So today's video is going to be about my top picks for Halloween, my top pick films for Halloween, and pretty much what I think, you should be watching. If you're into horror films and you love this stuff like I do, if you love Halloween, this is definitely the video for you. I myself, if you had never tuned in, primarily this is a video game channel, but I love to discuss films. Horror films is my favorite genre. I consider myself an expert on the subject. In fact, I did a really detailed video bringing down what I thought were the top 50 horror films. I'll put the link to that video in the description below, so check that out. It's a really great video and perfect for this time of year. But for this video, I want to discuss what's going on right now, 2016. So I'm going to break this down into two separate categories. The first one is going to be what's available right now on Netflix. So the reason why I'm doing this is because I know for a lot of you out there, that's really the only options that you have, or the most viable option that you have in order for you to be able to pick some films. So being that I've seen so many horror films over the years, I thought I'd pick the best of what Netflix has to offer, in my opinion. And then, of course, the other list is just going to be my personal picks for Halloween and what I think are not necessarily the best or even the scariest, but just great films for Halloween. So let's get started. Okay, so the first list I'm going to do here is going to be for Netflix. Now, keep in mind, Netflix has a very limited selection of horror films. They don't really have movies in general. Netflix is a real mixed bag, as many of you know. So but they do have a couple of gems, so let me throw out some of them. So the first one I want to recommend is Never Sleep Again. Now, this is kind of an odd choice because it's a documentary. It's not really a horror film, but if you love A Nightmare on Elm Street and you love that franchise, you love Freddy Krueger, and you really can't get enough of it, this is the ultimate thing to watch. It's I don't know, I think it's like 5 or 6 hours or something. It's extremely long. It's really, really long. But they break it down for each film. They go through the making, they go through all the controversies behind each film, and just everything. They break it down totally, and it's really cool. So if you're into Freddy Krueger, you want to check that one out. The next one is going to be New Nightmares, also sticking with the Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, my favorite Elm Street is obviously the original A Nightmare on Elm Street. I think it's the best one. I don't think any of the other ones even come close to that one. But the next best option in many people's lists is actually New Nightmares. Now, for me, my second favorite is A Nightmare on Elm Street 3. And then for some odd reason, I kind of like A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 after that. And then New Nightmares would somewhere creep in there. But anyway, and believe it or not, I appreciated some things about the remake, but that's a conversation for another day. But New Nightmares is really good. Basically, it brings back Heather Langenkamp, who played Nancy, but now she plays her own self. Same thing with Wes Craven. He's portraying himself as well as Robert Englund. It's an interesting twist, an interesting take. It could have been, probably executed a little bit better, but I love the concept, and I love the Freddy Krueger design on this one, so you might want to check that out if you're an Elm Street fan. The next one on my list is a violent horror film, but still kind of lighthearted, and that is Sleepy Hollow. I think most of you have probably seen Sleepy Hollow. It's a Tim Burton, Johnny Depp film or whatever, and I mean, who hasn't watched it? But it's on Netflix, and I think it's actually, really well done. I recently showed it to my kids, and my older kids had seen it already, but the younger ones that are now approaching their teens pretty soon, I showed it to them, and they enjoyed it. So I think if you're somewhere in maybe 13, 14, 15-year-old kind of area and you haven't seen Sleepy Hollow, it's one to check out. It's a nice take on a classic story. The next film I'm going to recommend on Netflix is going to be Curse of Chucky. I am not a big Child's Play fan. I love the original one. The second one was pretty good, and then I kind of lost interest after that. I've seen all of them, but usually I get a chuckle here and there out of it, and then I move on and totally forget about it. Some people really love The Bride of Chucky and all of that stuff. Just not for me. But Curse of Chucky is surprising in a sense that, Chucky has it's been a long layoff, and we haven't really seen a Child's Play or Chucky film in a long time. And a couple of years ago, they released this film, and it turned out to actually be pretty good. And I was actually surprised, and it was a good way to kind of reintroduce Chucky. I don't know what's going on as far as anything new or a sequel coming out to that. There's been kind of, things here and there, but I'm not too sure. But Curse of Chucky actually was surprisingly good. Chucky was scary. There was a lot of good suspense. The acting was decent, and there was a couple of plot twists in there that were interesting. So Curse of Chucky is pretty good. The next film is RE-ANIMATOR. Now, if you like zombie films and you like Walking Dead and stuff like that, I'm not going to say that you're going to like this one. This is definitely a unique kind of 80s take on the whole thing. It's got more of a comical element towards it, as do a lot of the 80s zombie films. But I would definitely, if you want to see something a little bit different, something with dark humor and of course the gore and everything, RE-ANIMATOR is a classic. I like the film, so definitely you might want to check that one out. Moving on, I'm going to say Hush is actually one of the more recent horror films that came out. It's on Netflix. Was hyped up a little bit. And, some people, when they watched it, were a little bit disappointed. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was great. It's not a creepy kind of scary. It's more of a serial killer kind of scary. And it is a little bit different. It does have a different kind of vibe from what you would normally see or watch on Halloween. But of course, we're talking Netflix here, so you got to kind of bear with the limited availability of some of the films. But Hush was actually surprisingly really good. I really liked the main actress, the way she did everything. The killer was a little kind of goofy, but at the end of the day, it had some scares, it had some suspense, and it definitely has a unique take. I don't want to give away too much, but it has a unique take on the whole victim kind of thing going on in horror films, and I really appreciated it. So Hush is definitely one I'm recommending. The next film is going to be The Babadook. Now, let me just start off by saying The Babadook is a really good film, but the ending is probably going to aggravate a lot of people. It goes really, really deep as far as the metaphors and just the whole concept of it is so different than anything you've seen before. And I don't want to give away too much, but I will say that there's a pretty big twist at the end of the film, and I did a review of the film, and it's actually on this channel, so you may want to check it out if you're kind of unsure, but it did a lot of things well, and then in other areas, I felt like the ending, I felt like horror films tend to kind of forget where they're going as they're moving on, and I felt like that film did it. So even though I'm highly recommending it, just keep in mind that it's not for everyone. So the next film I consider probably the biggest classic film of the Netflix list that I'm going through, and that is HELLRAISER. Now, if you haven't seen HELLRAISER, stop what you're doing right now. Have this be the first movie on your list, because HELLRAISER is a classic. And it's not just because of Pinhead. Everything about the original HELLRAISER, to me, kind of set a standard for many years to come with its grit and with its really kind of scary monster that's coming at you. It has a really great feeling of hopelessness. You really can't do anything about what's happening once you're in the situation, and I think that's always one of the best elements of a good horror film, is a sense of hopelessness, and HELLRAISER really delivers on that. The next film is another one that doesn't really have that Halloween kind of feeling, but it does have a good creepy vibe, and it actually turned out to be not a bad film, and it's a movie called Devil. If you haven't seen it, pretty much there's a bunch of people just trapped in an elevator, and crazy shit starts happening, and I guess judging from the title, Devil, you know that the devil has something to do with this, and it turned out to actually be a pretty smart movie, a pretty good movie, and definitely worth checking out if you've never seen anything and you're looking for something unique. And that's the thing I really enjoyed about the film. It was just different than everything else that I had seen before, and for me, that's always a big deal. The last film on my list is going to be Children of the Corn. Now, what could I say about Children of the Corn? I have fond memories of this film. A friend of my family's, this guy, took me and my sister. We were living in New York at the time, and he took us to see Children of the Corn. Now, me and my sister, I mean, I was like a kid. I must have been like, gosh, I don't remember. I couldn't have been more than 9 or 10. And me and my sister, my older sister, she's a couple of years older than me, 5 years older than me. So, you know, we're begging him. We're like, oh, come on, please take us. I remember we're sitting in the train and we're going to the theater, and he's looking at the ads, the newspapers, because that's how we did it back in the day. And, you know, he's looking at a list of movies, and we're just begging him. We wanted to see a horror film. So he was like, all right, I'll take you to see Children of the Corn. And we get there, and it was so violent and so bloody, and kids taking over and killing everything. And, you know, we see this grown man, like, kind of like freaking out that he took us to this film, but we loved it. And it stuck with me. And when it finally came out on HBO, I remember setting our VCR tapes, and we recorded it, and I used to watch it all the time. It's definitely a guilty pleasure film, but it's great. I wish that we had a film, I don't want to say a remake, but I wish we had a new film that was well done, that had that kind of vibe, because there's nothing like it. I don't want to talk too much more about it. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor and check it out. And that is going to be the list for Netflix. Now, let's get into my personal top films that I'm recommending for this awesome holiday season 2016. So the first film I want to recommend is A Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, this is following the theme for the Netflix films that I recommended, but again, how do you have this creepy kind of vibe feeling when you're sitting there with your friends and your family and you're eating popcorn and the lights are off and the surround sound is kicked on and you're not watching a Freddy Krueger movie? It just doesn't feel right. So I would recommend the original Elm Street. The next movie on my list is my favorite horror film of all time, favorite movie of all time actually, and that is The Exorcist. Now, I've done tons and tons of videos and I've talked to people about it. I went to see Linda Blair at the Tampa Theater, which is rumored to be haunted. That video is on this channel. I will also put that on the description below. Huge Exorcist fan. You know, I've read the novel a bunch of times. I've watched the film. I have it totally memorized. I am a fanatic. I don't want to talk about the film though. I just want to say, check it out. It's a classic, one of the best you're ever gonna see, and that's it. And if you're watching that TV show, shame on you. Stop watching that TV show. Go ahead and watch the original film. That's all you need. The next film on my list is gonna be The Shining. Now, The Shining also, like Halloween, I feel has this incredible creep factor, and part of the reason why it does is because same thing with maybe like a lot of haunted movies, but not all of them do it well, is the environment is actually the bad guy or the monster. It's not necessarily a creature or a monster or a spirit or a demon. It's not one entity that really makes it great. It's the actual environment that you're in, and I don't think any film does that better than The Shining. I think just the whole Overlook Hotel and the maze outside and the snow, and just again, like I was saying earlier with HELLRAISER, that sense of hopelessness is I can't overstate that, and that's what makes The Shining so brilliant. Of course, you have you know, Stanley Kubrick, and you have Jack Nicholson, and just the overall acting and everything else brings a lot to the film. But it's a classic, my second favorite horror film of all time, and you definitely want to check that one out. Okay, so moving on, the next film on my list is Drag Me to Hell. Now, Drag Me to Hell, again, is one of those more lighter horror films. Now, I'm not going to say people aren't going to find this one scary, especially if you're scared of like things like anything Sam Raimi has ever done in his Evil Dead films. But this has a lot of comical elements to it, as do some of those films. But for some odd reason, that seems to scare a lot of people, his style. So, but when I say it's lighter, it's not dealing with... It's not as heavy as some of the other horror films. It's not taking itself quite as serious, and that may appeal to a lot more of a broader audience. So Drag Me to Hell is just absurd, it's funny, it's scary, it's got a lot of great elements to it, and it's great entertainment, especially if you have a lot of younger teenagers kind of around who want to see something kind of funny, not too serious, where you're kind of talking and laughing in the middle of the film and you're not like really zoned in. This would be a really good film for that. Just a fun movie, and Drag Me to Hell is one of my favorite horror kind of comedy films, so definitely recommend that. Another classic I want to talk about is American Werewolf in London. I can't overstate this enough. American Werewolf in London is not only a classic, still, after all these years, the best werewolf film ever made. Nothing has really even come close to that. And for some odd reason, it's just not a popular thing in horror films anymore. You would think with the technology that we have now, and I don't mean CG, I mean just the advancements that we've made, that they would have done a great werewolf film by now. I actually have a buddy of mine who wrote a screenplay for a werewolf film, and he's been trying to push it for a couple of years, and the concept and everything in his is really done well. But back to this film, it's one of the classics. It's one of the best horror films ever made, and it's absolutely the best werewolf film, so definitely check that one out, American Werewolf in London. The next one is kind of a tough one. See, you can't really enjoy horror films without enjoying a Friday the 13th film. Now, I don't consider any of the Friday the 13th films like great horror films. They're all pretty much knockoffs off of Halloween and Michael Myers. Now, you may prefer Jason, but the honest truth is that it's kind of a knockoff. It's the best knockoff, but it is a knockoff. And there's tons of Jason films. I'm gonna have to say that my favorite one, and the one that I'm gonna recommend for this list, is gonna be Friday the 13th Part 6. That one is my favorite one. Not to say that the other ones weren't over the top, but once it got to Friday the 13th Part 7 with the whole telekinesis thing, and then Jason Takes Manhattan, and then it just really went off the rails after Part 6. But I thought Part 6 was actually really done well. Could have actually been, they could have just kind of cut out the other Friday the 13th films, in my opinion, maybe for the exception of 5. But really 3 and 4 didn't do much for me, and made that actually the sequel to the first one or the second one or whatever. But it doesn't matter. It's a really good film. Definitely my favorite Friday the 13th. Not everyone's gonna agree with that, but it's my list, and that's what I think. Psycho is a bona fide classic, not just in the horror film genre, but just in films in general. If you study films, or if you're into movies, this is one that you really can't overlook. And I want to leave it there, but I feel like I have to just discuss a little bit more on it. A lot of people are going to be turned off because it's an old film, a very old film. It's a black and white film. It's not particularly violent, and then nothing in it is going to really be new to anybody who watches it. The reason why is because so many films have borrowed from Psycho that when you watch it, it's not going to be as shocking as it would if you were just new to all of this. With that said, though, it's still worth a watch. If you want to know what the origins of the slasher films are, and really where all of that came from, you kind of probably want to watch Psycho and see how so many films have borrowed from it. It's still a classic, and it's still definitely entertaining. I think one of the best films to watch with a group of people, for me, has always been Scream, the original Scream. It's a funny film. It's got that whole slasher thing going. It's got kind of a plot twist in the end. It just has a lot of great horror film elements. And it's just a ton of fun to watch with people, just like Drag Me to Hell, just like the next movie I'm going to talk about after this. It's just one of those movies where you just kind of, it's a popcorn movie, and it's really enjoyable. So if you haven't seen Scream, or even if you have and it's just been a long time and you're looking for some recommendations for Halloween, check that one out. You won't be disappointed. Now, probably the most fun film to me on this list is a movie called Fright Night. Now, I'm talking about the 1985 Fright Night. I'm not talking about those crappy remakes that they made. The 1985 Fright Night, to me, is the most fun horror film of everything on this list. More fun than Drag Me to Hell, more fun than Scream. It's just one of those movies where I watch it, like I have to watch it. Like if I'm going through my, collection of films and I have nothing else to watch, that's one that just never disappoints. It can be out in the background and I'm doing things around the house, so I can be sitting there totally focused on it. Either way, whichever approach that I'm taking, I'm just always thoroughly entertained. Some of the catchphrases, some of the just the way the actors are, the way the film looks, and the cinematography, everything about it, the practical effects. It's just a classic. It's so good. Charlie Brewster, Evil Ed, Jerry Dandridge, all the characters, Peter Vincent. It's perfect in my mind. It's one of my favorite movies. And if you've never seen Fright Night, it's not the easiest film to kind of find or whatever, but I'm sure you can probably type it up somewhere and stream it, or probably order it on Amazon or something. But definitely worth a watch. One of my favorites by far. Okay, so the next film on my list is Insidious. I gotta say that if you're thinking about like ghost kind of movies or demon kind of movies, there's not many films better than this. Now, there are a couple and they're not on my list, and the reason why is because I think this one, considering that it's modern, considering that it's not as violent as some of the other films that I would put in front of it, but just those factors alone, and the scare factor, because it does have a really good scare factor in it, great music, great acting. It's, for this day and age, in my opinion, it is the perfect style horror film. And if you haven't seen Insidious, check it out. It's really well done, and I can't say enough about it. I think James Wan, as he's a director, all the horror films that he's directed, I still think that this is his best one. So check that one out. The next one I want to talk about is Evil Dead. Now, Evil Dead, this is a kind of a difficult one because a lot of people prefer the original film or the second one, and some people even prefer Army of Darkness. I even hear some people now saying that they think the show is even better than the films. Go figure. But my favorite of all of them is actually the remake, and it's pretty fitting because this month they're going to release an unrated version of the Evil Dead remake, and I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on that Blu-ray. But if you don't get your hands on that Blu-ray and you feel like watching it like before Halloween, I think it comes out on the 28th, if you really need to see it, definitely stream it, rent it, buy it, check it out. Whatever it is you got to do. The Evil Dead 2013 remake is gory, it's violent, it's fast-paced, it's really intense. I consider it like a roller coaster. It doesn't have a really long, slow burn. It pretty much, once it gets going, it's just intense the whole way through. And for some people, that's a little bit too much, but I think most people who are into horror films really appreciate, that aspect of it. Now, the original film and the sequel and the Army of Darkness, they're good. They're more comical than this one is. The original Evil Dead wasn't really meant to be funny, but because the effects were so bad, it was funny. But it's still a great film. So any one of those that you want to watch, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But my personal pick is the remake. And last but not least on this list is going to be the original Halloween. Now, you can talk about H2O, you can talk about Halloween 2, you can talk about, heck, any of them, except for the third one. But you can talk about any of them, and a lot of people seem to have their favorites. I think the general consensus is that the original one is the best one, and I'm gonna have to totally agree. I don't like the Rob Zombie iterations of Halloween, especially the second one. I thought it was so awful, but I didn't like the first one either, the first Rob Zombie remake. It's unfortunate because I think Rob Zombie has the potential to really do great horror, but I just think he kind of ruined the Halloween franchise, and right now I don't think they really know where to go with it because of those Rob Zombie films. So it's a real shame, but the original Halloween is a classic. It's just so good. And again, just like I would say with Psycho, and even like a movie like Rosemary's Baby or even The Exorcist, these films, this particular film is the original kind of slasher kind of movie. So many movies have borrowed from it. So when you watch it, if this is the first time you're seeing it, you're gonna feel like you've seen it before. Not because this film is unoriginal, but it's because it started basically what we've seen everything, ever since. It's the formula to a slasher kind of film. And I think it's definitely still worth a watch, still executed better than a majority of the knockoffs that we've seen. The thing about Michael Myers is that you don't know anything really about him in the original film. And that's what made it scary. With the Rob Zombie iterations and a few of the other ones, they kind of start revealing so much about the character, and everybody has their own take on the character. Every single director who's kind of taken on one of these horror films, one of the Michael Myers films, seem to keep revealing too much, and it makes them less scary. But the original horror film, you don't really know anything about him, and he's there, he's menacing, you don't know what the motivation is, you just know he's out to kill you. His slow walk, his creeping behind the shadows, it's just great. Very well done film, one of my favorites of all time. That is going to be it for this list. I hope that I was able to influence you, and maybe it'll make your Halloween a little bit more enjoyable. And hopefully there'll be a couple of films on this list that you may have not seen and end up watching and enjoying. Definitely leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. And of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you once again for watching. Mastermyne out.